Welcome back, everyone. This is Dave from Corn Productions with my co-host Stacie, here to talk about the new Quantum Leap Revival, Season 2, Episode 3, Closure Encounters. The episode's description reads as follows. Now a government agent, Ben investigates unexplained extraterrestrial activity. The episode was directed by Chris Grismer. He directed O Ye of Little Faith, SOS, Judgment Day last season. And he is basically, I think, my favorite director on this series. And the episode was written by Rami Lore. Before going any further, I'll tell you a couple of things. One, this is not a spoiler-free podcast, so if you haven't watched the episode, I recommend you go and check it out, and then come back and give us a listen. Secondly, if you're listening on one of the platforms that this podcast is now available, please subscribe. You can also head over to my YouTube channel, Corn Productions, where additional content can be discovered, both Quantum Leap related and otherwise. If you're already on my YouTube channel, please like, share, and comment, as well as subscribing to my channel. All right, I actually have quite a few shout-outs this week.
Okay. And good job, by the way, saying unexplained extraterrestrial activity without stumbling.
I was so proud of myself that I actually managed to get through that. Usually that is exactly the type of thing that I would stumble over, for sure. All right, so the first one is for Ashley Wright. He pointed out a whoopsie of mine from last week.
Big whoopsie.
Yep, I had the last 20 minutes was the wrong audio file. It basically went into my X-Files podcast, which is actually kind of more fitting for this week's episode than last week. But yeah, thank you for pointing that out so I could fix it.
Proves to us you passed the test.
Yep.
Listen all the way through.
Yep, absolutely. I think he might have probably stopped when he realized it was
all the way through to there. Yeah.
But all right, Alpha pointed out that Dr. Ruth is in fact still alive. She's 95 years old.
I mean, we could have found this information.
I mean, we could have.
We just, you know, we're talking about it on the fly when we were talking about it.
And she does in fact have grandchildren. Mark Davidson thought last week was a great episode. He loves episodes set in the 80s. His only beef was that they didn't have an establishing shot of the bank.
Yeah, I saw multiple people say that.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, Ashley Wright, Alpha, Mark Davidson, those are our three regular listeners from the old school Quantum Leap podcast.
Yeah.
Ashley Wright, he's not surprised that he was here. Alpha, I am surprised by, because as far as the last I had checked, he hadn't even watched any of the episodes of the series yet. I had told him that he could watch it on Peacock, but I hadn't known that if he had even watched it or not. And actually, I'm not even sure where Alpha is from. Alpha, if you're listening, and I'm sure you probably are, in the comments, let me know whereabouts you're from. Not exactly. You don't need to tell me the street address or anything like that. And Mark, I was surprised because I didn't think Quantum Leap would be available in his area. He mentioned that he was watching it on a friend's Paramount Plus.
And where does Mark live?
He's in the UK. So
do you know where in the UK?
Not really sure, to be honest with you, no. And Mark, if you feel like commenting and mentioning exactly where you are.
Because as far as I know, it's not available in England, but maybe in one of the other parts of the UK it is.
Maybe.
I don't know. I have a hard time with all of that where things are around the world stuff.
Yeah, me
We have a hard enough time tracking where things are for us. So.
Right, exactly. Kelly M. thanked us for the birthday shout-out. She also doesn't trust Addison's new boyfriend, and also found it weird that Ben didn't have the physical limitations having leaked into an older woman. Now, mind you, Kelly M. did not watch the original series, so she doesn't know about all the wishy-washying that the original series did as far as to how actual leaping worked that we discussed last week. So Kelly M. is not familiar with any of that like we are. In response to if it matters when we release our podcast, she watches it on Saturday. That's usually what's good for her, so it doesn't really matter to her any. We have a new listener in Amanda. She's new to the podcast. I just said that. She found us on Rumble. I've started including some of our stuff on Rumble, which is a YouTube-like service. And that's how she actually found us on YouTube. So that actually seems to have paid off.
Yeah, and something about the algorithm didn't let her find us, even though she was searching for Quantum Leap Podcast. She only found the Quantum Leap Podcast.
Right.
Which, of course, I do recommend everybody go over and listen to them as well. But it is great to have you here with us.
Absolutely. And I'm wondering if she also found Fate's Wide Wheel, or if she didn't even find them. They're pretty popular.
I did happen to click on her profile just to see like her actual name, since it only shows us the at names now.
Mm-hmm.
And I did happen to notice it showed subscriptions to both Fate's Wide Wheel and the Quantum Leap podcast.
Okay.
So we definitely recommend everybody follow all three of us.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and they have more followers than us, but if you're here, you already know about us.
Right.
So
Yeah.
We're not going to get new people by telling you to follow us.
So yeah, she also was did not trust Addison's new boyfriend and was not thrilled to have another Al Beth situation. It's interesting that she mentions that because that's exactly what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
In that Ben is now both Sam Beckett and Al at the same time.
Right.
So that's a very interesting new wrinkle to the character. She says Friday is a decent day to release the podcast because that's when she would listen to it. And she also asked us if we read the books. And I will say that, yes, I did read some of the books. I have some of the books. I didn't read all of them.
I feel like I read most of them, if not all of them at some point.
Yes.
And I unfortunately don't have any of them anymore. I don't know where they went, but
mine are
throughout all of my moves in my life, they disappeared.
Mine are deep in storage. I have no hope of finding them.
And I sadly don't have a lot of recollection of them. I remember little tidbits. I remember overall arcs, but like I don't remember any of those details. I'd love to read them again. Unfortunately, they're so hard to find now.
Yeah.
It would be great, wouldn't it, if with the new revival we get not only a re-release of the original series, but some new crossover stories. That would be amazing.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, so fan fiction writers, those of you who wrote those original books, and get on it. Get somebody behind this. Let's do it.
My most vivid memory of the books, by the way, was a book called Mirror's Edge, which happened to be the last Quantum Leap book written. I mean, at least as far as within that section of writing before they became the comics or whatever.
Right.
And it was advertised as the Last Leap Adventure. And I bought this on my senior trip when I was going to Washington. And I was hoping to get some closure that the new series never gave me. Well, unfortunately, it just leads right into Mirror Image, basically. That's how the end of the book is. And I'm like, oh, you have got to be kidding. It made me so mad. But anyway, so I was considering at one point covering the books, but I'm not sure how I would do that exactly.
Yeah.
I definitely couldn't do that point by point.
Harder to talk about a book than a show, right?
Yep.
And I mean, that's something that, I was thinking about as we're talking about Under the Dome is I want to compare the show to the book, which, okay, we can compare, but you can't just talk about a book.
Right.
Right. And I was even thinking about it, with, Shelley Thompson's book. We just interviewed her about her book, and I'm like, yeah, I want to read this book, and then we can talk about it. But how do you talk about a book on a podcast, other than like the general scope of it? I
mean, I know people that do it. I haven't actually listened to
our format, like our scene by scene format, doesn't work with a book.
No, it does not. So we would have to come up with some other way to do that. Last shout out would be for J&J Adventures. He recently found our podcast all the way at the beginning with episode 0. He said of all the podcasts that he's listened to, we are the best one. And that is a great compliment.
It is a great compliment because there are so many wonderful podcasts out there for this show and for entertainment in general.
Yep. The last place he was commenting on was the episode 4 podcast for Indecent Proposal. If he keeps going, he'll eventually find out that he gets shouted out.
He'll eventually hear the shout out, yeah.
I can't wait for him to get to the 3-hour marathon that we did. And I'm kind of curious, will he say turtle time?
Turtle time. And what was our other one? We had 2 keywords in that one.
Yeah, I don't remember.
We had one after like a couple hours, and then we took like a whole nother hour that we gave another one.
All right, so Stacie, your thoughts on this week's episode?
All right, so I liked the episode. I mean, I did enjoy it. But I feel like it may have been a little overhyped. And not that the series overhyped it or NBC. I didn't really see them say a lot about it, but people who screened this episode, were saying that this was their favorite of the 3. And
I specifically saw Fate's Wide Wheel say
I saw multiple screeners say that, and I don't know, maybe I had too high of expectations. I wanted there to be like aliens in the Alien episode. I wanted some references that we didn't get.
Right.
It just felt like it was missing a little something for me. Not that it wasn't a good episode. It was fine. And I love Hannah. I real happy with where we're at with her. I don't know. Overall, it felt like it was missing a little something to me.
For me, I think this is probably my favorite episode of the season, so we differ a little bit here.
Okay.
And that's a good thing because variety is the spice of life. Maybe it's because I was such a fan of the X-Files that I appreciated that atmosphere within the episode. And like I said at the top, Chris Grismer is quickly becoming one of my favorite directors of this series. And it had a weird continuity between this and O Ye of Little Faith, which Chris Grismer directed, but he didn't write. But I'm thinking he probably had some input into the writing because there was some like references directly to that episode. So, and this is not the same writer.
That just speaks good to, their continuity.
Yeah,
team.
absolutely. Yeah. Anything else to say before we get it? Oh, you know what? I know you have one thing to talk about.
What's that?
Well, actually, no, I think we probably should save that for the end. Shouldn't we have? The poll?
Yeah, we'll get to it when we talk about that scene.
Okay. All right. So, is there anything else you want to talk about before we get into it?
No. Let's just jump right in.
Ben leaps in and
no saga cell, no narration, no recap.
Yep. Yeah,
which
that was
is
weird.
An interesting choice. I think they're breaking from the format here.
So he's talking to a farmer. It's late at night. It's all spooky, and the farmer's saying they have abducted 3 of the cows already. Ben quickly checks his wallet and finds out he's Agent Robin Cook. Do I have that name right?
Robert Cook.
Robert Cook, not Robin. Okay.
I'm sure that's a typo, not a.
Right. Yes. And he's from the Project Signs, and the year. I don't think we get it here, but
we don't get it here. Yeah, eventually we get 1949. We definitely did not get an exact date. I hate that aspect of this series, but we're locked in now. They're not giving us dates.
So
unless it's coincidental that we see it somewhere, but they're not making it a point to give us dates. But at least we have a year. There were a couple episodes in the first season where they didn't even give a year. That really bothered me.
So this week, watching with your eyes did not pay off.
No. I looked at his ID. There was an expiration date on his ID.
Okay.
And I rewound and rewatched that blurb of half a second 10 times, and it just doesn't come into frame to read what the expiration date on the ID even is.
Well, I hope it's current.
I mean, it was 1949. Oh. So I'm thinking maybe we were supposed to see a date there, but editing cut it too fast.
Maybe.
Or something.
Well,
I mean, that wouldn't have been a leap date, but that would have been a time frame anyways.
Oh, so if it expires in 1949, he has to get that thing renewed real quick.
Well, that's the thing. We don't know. Is it January of 49 or is it December of 49?
Right.
Is it Halloween time?
Right.
We don't know much.
Yeah, this is as close to the Halloween episodes we're going to get. When they were filming these episodes, they had no idea when they were going to air. So it wasn't really possible to create a specific Halloween episode.
Yeah.
But this is as close as we're going to get because next week doesn't seem to have any Halloween themes whatsoever. And that's more closer to Halloween than this episode is. But, moving along. The farmer claims that the aliens have landed. And Ben goes to investigate and just finds a bunch of kids laughing and some garden gnomes. Yeah,
this group of kids set up the garden gnomes, and he tells the farmer, if you leave out some milk and cookies, they'll stop bothering you.
I always suspected that garden gnomes were secretly evil. And I think that might work. Leaving out milk and cookies for me. Kind of like Santa Claus.
Yeah, Santa Claus, aliens, kids. What's the difference?
That's good to know. Ben goes to the car, and Addison appears. Ben reminisces about past Halloweens and eventually realizes what he's doing and apologizes for it.
Yeah, which I don't think he has anything to apologize for.
Right.
Bringing up something they did on Halloween.
Right.
Okay, just because she's moved on doesn't mean you're not still, part of each other's lives and you don't have a history. Mm-hmm. He wasn't, unless he was. We didn't get to hear the story, but unless, he's talking about something specifically, romantic that happened, it's not inappropriate for him to mention a memory that they share.
Right. Addison wants to know if he wants to talk about the fact that she moved on. According to her, it's been about 8 months. Ben thinks they should just focus on the leap for now. Ben finds a picture of a missing teen in his car, which apparently was from Starlight.
What he found was, what's it called?
A missing poster?
No. It was oh my goodness, it's in my notes somewhere, but I lost my place because I think you jumped a little bit from where I was.
Oh.
Okay, so Ziggy didn't know what they were there for. Ben found a telegram in the car, a telegram that he had been sent, it was his orders of where to go next.
Gotcha.
Saying for him to proceed to Starlight, New Mexico, where an anonymous report came in about a UFO that ran 2 girls off of the road, and one of them is in a coma.
See, with the rapid fire, yeah,
Sorry.
With the rapid fire editing, there's so many things I miss, and I'm like, you know what? I'm not even gonna worry about it because anything that I miss, my co-host is definitely gonna be able to get. So, and anything that we miss, Kellyanne will
Absolutely.
chime in and tell us.
We're counting on Kelly.
Yes. It's interesting that they're from the town Starlight, because Starlight is a project that was mentioned in Quantum Leap, the original one.
I thought it was Star Bright.
It might be Starlight. I'm not even sure now. Starlight, Starbright, I'm not sure.
First star, see tonight.
Yes, and
Twinkle, twinkle, little star.
Well, that's also interesting. Okay, there's at least one callback here, because the episode that dealt with aliens in the original series, season 5, was called Starlight, Starbright.
Was it?
It was. Yeah.
I don't think that's right either.
I'm pretty sure that I'm right on this one. I might not be right about the first
part of it's in there somewhere, but I don't think it was all that. Anyways, I don't think Starlight, New Mexico is a real place. I tried looking and I didn't find anything, so I think they made that up.
Mm-hmm.
What I found interesting here, we found out Starlight's 300 miles away. So why was Ben leapt into here?
Right.
And we're not even told what this location is. We just know it's 300 miles from Starlight, New Mexico.
Yeah, why not wait till we're there?
Why didn't he leap in once Agent Cook got to Starlight? Like, how do they even know that this telegram is current?
Right.
Because, again, we never checked the date. Addison never said, oh, today's, March 4th, and this was written yesterday.
Right.
I mean, unless they just cut that out of the scene.
Yeah, oops. These orders were actually from, 6 months ago.
Yeah, you already finished this case.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's interesting. And I actually have in my notes 3,000 miles away. I'm glad it's a little closer than that.
3,000. That'd be a long car ride. But yeah, 300 miles away. Why did he not just leap in there?
Right. I don't think
was the universe just giving him this opportunity to chat with Addison?
I mean, they kind of did that last week.
Right.
But I mean, they didn't let him finish the conversation. They just left it at
But to give them 300 miles to chat just seems odd.
It does.
At the front of the leap. Mm-hmm. Usually leaps, bring you kind of sort of close to where you need to be.
Right.
Not 300 miles away.
Right. Yeah, I don't understand why it would choose now to leap him in there. Why not wait until after he's completed the journey and gotten to Starlight?
Right.
But back at the project, Ian excitedly talks about Project Signs, which was the original Project Blue Book. Ian's a believer, and have we ever gotten that little piece of information about Ian?
We've gotten tidbits about Ian has some quirky beliefs, mm-hmm. right? They're also a conspiracy theorist,
right? So
I feel like they believe in the weirdest stuff and kind of don't believe in basic stuff.
Gotcha.
If I had to guess. But yeah, Ian was very excited about this and even said that being a government agent investigating UFOs is a bucket list item for them.
And it's funny because Ian has an interesting arc in this episode. Every time you see him, he's sadder. Every time they see him, yeah. So every time that we see them,
there you go.
Okay, I think I got it right. All right, every time we see them, they are sadder and sadder. Because, it becomes increasingly clear to them that this is not about aliens. And he just gets more and more despondent as they get more and more despondent as the episode goes along. So we're back into the pronoun thing, which I was never really super great with. And, I'm trying. Anyway, moving along from this.
So Jen doesn't believe.
Right.
She's very anti-UFO here. And surprisingly, Magic says that he's a believer. Jen doesn't buy it. Well, how does you're so logical. How can you think that there are UFO, or how can you think that there are aliens, rather? Of course, there are UFOs by definition. He says that, being leaped into changes one perspective on life's possibilities, which makes a lot of sense. Once you've experienced some weird shit, you're going to believe in weird shit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting that he just kind of casually brings it up now, because last season that was a little bit more of a secret. But now he's just openly talking about it. I'm not sure. I mean, I guess it's been 3 years, and yeah.
It's been 3 years. Yeah, we don't know what's happened.
Right. The missing girl happens to be Carrie Baker. She's 17. Her and Melanie Hunt were driving in a car late at night. They ended up getting into a car crash where Melanie ended up in a coma and died, and Carrie went to prison for manslaughter.
Yeah, in the original history.
Yeah, in the original history. Yes.
In the original. So basically, in the original history, Carrie was blamed for this accident that she was at fault, and led to Melanie's death.
Meanwhile, in the past, there's an awkward drive with Addison and Ben. Does she need to be here for this entire ride?
Right. Why? The conversation was like really awkward. Like they weren't using this to talk, right? They were specifically trying not to talk, and they're not even talking about the leap. I only have eyes for you's playing on the radio. That's making things more. Turn off the freaking radio,
right?
Or change the station,
right? Why
are you choosing to sit in this awkwardness? And
I definitely wouldn't.
Like he asks about the team, but like in a very like, I'm not really trying to have a conversation kind of way. And she's like, oh, this is a cool car. If you don't have anything to add here and you're not going to actually talk,
right?
Why are you sticking around?
Exactly. She does not need to be.
Why are you sitting in the car for 300 miles?
Exactly how long would it take to go 300 miles?
I mean, if you're not stopping 5 or 6 hours, I would guess.
And she doesn't have anything better to do in the.
I mean, maybe longer because you know speed limits were probably a lot lower back then. And you know, it still bothers me too that she can just sit in the car, move along with him without tapping any directions into the hand link.
Right.
Like Al was able to do these things, sure, but when he would manipulate himself into the environment like that, he'd be tapping Ziggy like doop 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 doop. I'm gonna, you know, change my position. I'm gonna follow Sam. You know, there was an effort given to show us that, you know, what we're seeing is not reality, right? And in this series, I feel like everybody just sits, just like, oh, we're in a car? Okay, we're in a car. Cool. There's no interaction with the hand link to make these things happen.
Right, yeah.
And that bothers me. It still does.
And it probably will for the rest of the series. Ben says he remembers everyone, and for some reason this bit of information bothers Addison, and I'm not really sure.
Yeah, because you know what? It was probably easier for her, thinking that, well, Ben doesn't really remember me anyways, right?
Right.
But to be told, like, I remember everything, oh, so this is harder for you than it would have been if you didn't remember everything.
Right. He arrives at his destination. Carrie tells the story about... Oh, they go and see Carrie. Carrie tells the story about her car ride late at night. The radio started making noises. The sky lit up. Bright lights. They're trying to get away from whatever it is. And then their car crashes. Yeah. They get out for a run. Carrie fell behind and hid. And she lost track of Melanie. The sheriff comes in. And we find out that this is his granddaughter.
Yeah, so before the conversation, you know, Ben was like, should we wait for your parents? And she said, it's just me and my grandpa. He's not going to want to hear this again, so let's just talk about it. And when the sheriff comes in, Ben and Addison didn't pick up right away that this is the grandfather. They don't find that out until, like, the next scene. I had that pegged right away.
Yeah.
So I don't know. They're losing their touch.
Yes.
They're being a little less observant than they should be.
Well, they're a little distracted this week. Ben asks the sheriff if he's been to the accident site, and he asks if he found anything, and the sheriff is like, no, because I'm really bad at my job.
Yeah, they got off to a kind of rocky start here.
Ben,
and this is Sheriff Woodrow Morgan, played by Louis Hetherum.
The sheriff found Melanie Hunt unconscious back in the car with a bottle of whiskey. Apparently, Carrie is quite the troublemaker since she lost her mother. And Addison points out the fact that the sheriff doesn't bring up his own loss in the situation because this is a generation of men that were not in touch with their feelings. They're more harder edge, so on and so forth. Russell Hunt, father of Melanie, comes in. He's all hostile, wants to know why Carrie isn't in lockup, and says he wants her there before the end of the day. Yeah,
and Russell Hunt's played by David Grant Wright. And the kids, I didn't mention them. Melanie's played by Ashley Grubbs. And Carrie Baker is played by Allison Thornton. And, we don't get to spend a lot of time with Hunt, but we get to learn a lot about him, right? He's a big deal, is basically what we're told about him. And it's funny that Addison, didn't know that the sheriff was the grandfather, but the second Hunt walks in the room, she's sprouting facts about him.
Right.
So they knew who he was the second he walked in the door. So I found that interesting.
The grandfather says he hopes Ben finds something because otherwise he's going to lose the last of his family.
Yeah, and he's like, oh, all I got to do is prove aliens are real.
Is that all? And credits, 10 minutes into the episode, we're getting the logo and the 3D logo. And yeah, that's a pretty long cold open, as I pointed out in the past. We're at the diner, and we meet Hannah's character. She's a waitress, and she believes Carrie's story. She seems really smart, makes some science references, which impresses Ben. And then the sheriff comes in to get Ben, and they end up riding together.
Yeah. So Hannah. Hannah is one of our two new regular cast members. We already met Tom in episode 1. This is our first time meeting Hannah, played by Eliza Taylor, best known from her lead in The 100.
Yes.
And I love her. I talked about that in when we made an episode talking about, the announcement of these new characters. So I'm happy we finally met her. And she seems really kind of quirky, right? She instantly seems to know more than she should.
Right.
She says it's because she also works at the hotel, and she saw Ben when he checked in. I don't know if I really believe her, that she's just very observant. We already know there's more going on with her, but I feel like she knows things because she knows things.
Right.
I just feel like there's more to even this story,
Yes,
that
absolutely.
she instantly knows who he is and what he's here for. And it was a little too convenient that she's like, oh, I saw you. I've been watching you.
Ooh.
And she gave us this analogy about a yo-yo. And I feel like this might have been foreshadowing. She says that if you showed a yo-yo to somebody 100 years ago, they would think it's witchcraft.
Right.
And I feel like that might come back in our Salem episode.
Yeah, you think so?
I don't think he's going to have a modern yo-yo because he doesn't leap with things. But I feel like something representative of a yo-yo is going to come up within that episode. I feel like this reference has to go somewhere, specifically saying, they would think it's witchcraft.
Right. Given that we know that we're going to have an episode like that about witchcraft.
Right.
Are we talking about Hannah's character more now, or are we
No, let's talk about it
now?
later.
Okay.
Those were just the things that came up in the scene.
So the sheriff and Ben ride together. Ben asks questions, and the sheriff says he isn't interested in holding hands. He doesn't want to be in a relationship with Ben. He doesn't want to date him. More, he doesn't really want to talk about his feelings, so this is his way of deflecting. And he notices that they're being followed. And the sheriff's idea is to play chicken by driving directly at the other car.
Yeah.
Which has hunts people. We don't know that yet, but
he suspects it right away.
Right.
That he says, "Oh, it's probably huntsmen. I'm the sheriff. I'm going to investigate this crash site. I'm trying to find out that I'm trying to get my granddaughter off the hook." Right. He suspects that these are Hunt's guys coming to make sure that there's no funny business, that the investigation's proper. So your response is to play chicken and run them off the road.
Seems legit to me.
I mean, wouldn't it have made more sense to just let them watch you do the investigation?
Right.
So they know that you're not falsifying evidence or whatever?
I mean, yeah, that would make sense to me, but whatever.
Doesn't it make you look suspicious that you're, running them off the road as the sheriff of this town?
Right. He wants to run them out of town, but he can't quite do that. Ben thinks that basically the sheriff is either completely crazy or will stop at nothing to, find out the actual truth.
I'm leaning towards crazy.
Yeah, I was kind of going that direction myself. And basically the sheriff was like, oh, it took you long enough to figure that out, or something along those lines. And it's like, wait, which one were you referring to?
Right.
Which one were you confirming was true? And from this, Ben realizes that the sheriff was the anonymous caller that called the science project.
This is the person who called Project Sign in the first place and got Ben to come here, got, this agent to come here. And that seems like interesting information because he's been very resistant to this whole investigation so far.
Well,
he doesn't seem like someone who's really looking for help.
Right. I think that's a front, obviously, because he clearly, did all this to get help, and I guess maybe he just doesn't want to look like he wants to help.
Right.
But he clearly does. So they investigate the scene. There are only 2 sets of prints. One was the sheriff. Nothing ends up seeming to confirm Carrie's story that Melanie ever left the car. Addison arrives to tell Ben that people who were following them were Hunt's people. We don't care anymore, but I think that's when we can...
It's confirmation that he was right. That's who they were.
She wanders off to, I don't know, search for something. I forgot what.
So she's investigating, and she finds a footprint.
Right. I think they mentioned they have 24 hours to figure things out. The footprint is a partial print that someone made an attempt to, cover over.
Right. So it was a print that was walking towards the car. Mm-hmm. Somebody was walking towards the car. Doesn't fit the girl's story that they were running away from the car. So it doesn't make sense that it's their print. And there's no other prints, which means somebody covered tracks. Because you don't just have one footprint somewhere, right?
Right.
So tracks were covered. Why were tracks covered? Ben says something's going on here. Somebody else was there. Mm-hmm. And at this point, it was actually 72 hours they thought they had.
Oh, okay.
Because the judge is supposed to be coming on Friday. Mm. That changes later. But as of right now, that's what they think.
So at the hospital, Addison tries to talk to Ben and suggests that Carrie might be lying. And Ben simply says, no.
Yeah, he says, I hear you, but you're wrong.
Yeah, she tries to make her case. Ben says that I hear you. There's merit to what you're saying, but you're just straight up wrong. Ben finds Carrie reading to Melanie. And Ben says that she can't be there. He says he believes her, and Ben asks about a possible third person. Carrie says it wasn't a person, it was a what? Yeah,
so confirmation that, Melanie saw not someone else there, but something else there.
Right. It was a 3-eyed, green-eyed monster.
Yeah, we see it in like a flashback sequence, which, we also saw a kind of flashback like this when we were first hearing her story. And, we see these 3 green glowing lights. I mean, I don't know. To me, instantly, you could tell that was like a flashlight of some kind. Mm-hmm. And it was like, okay, can I tell that because we're supposed to tell that? Or is it just a bad production?
I'm not sure.
I mean, obviously, that's what it ends up being.
Right.
We learn we're not dealing with aliens, but I feel like they should have maybe made a better effort for us not to know that yet.
Basically this, and I think OE of Little Faith did this better, but it's the same kind of trick as in that episode.
Right.
In that we're presented with the possibility of something paranormal, and that doesn't end up being the case.
Right.
In both episodes, which is why I think Chris Grismer had some kind of input into the writing of this episode.
Or maybe, I mean, I don't know how they assign who does what episodes. Mm-hmm. Maybe he was like, I really want to direct this one. Right. Because I like, this type of story.
Yeah, maybe. They go outside. Addison sees Hunt's people, and Ben goes over to talk to them. And Addison's like, no, I told you that so you would avoid that.
Right.
And they end up beating up on Ben. The sheriff intervenes with a gunshot.
He shoots his gun up in the air. It makes them leave. But this is a very tense situation between Hunt's men. Like, who are these people that are just like literally like beating him up in the street for no reason? Right.
We have a project scene. There's a lot of conversation here, much of which I can't really follow the logic of because it's just so fast-paced.
Okay, so I'll take that conversation then. So Ian tells us that Hunt is the largest landowner in New Mexico. He owns half of the land between Starlight and the Mexican border. And the accident was actually on his land, so he owns the land where all of this happened.
Right.
And he had originally got his money from oil, but the wells that he had on his land dried up in 1946. I think this is the first time that we actually learned that it's now 1949. So 3 years ago, the wells dried up. So where does he have money coming from, right? They know this guy has money coming in from somewhere, but it's off the books. Jen suggests that he might be running drugs.
Yeah.
Magic suggests he could be using a helicopter.
Now, it's really weird. In this scene, Addison is like, 1949 is a little early for drugs. And I don't understand what she means by that, because, you know, like, drugs have been, like, in the entire history of civilization, there have always been drugs.
Right.
So what is she talking about?
I think she just meant for smuggling drugs.
Okay.
Across borders.
Okay.
Maybe she, because, you know, it's Jen who confirms, like, oh, actually, this was, like, a big thing on the Mexican border in the 40s.
Right. So it's just a matter of Addison doesn't really know what she's talking about.
She's not a history person, right?
Okay.
I mean, none of our people really are history experts that we've been told. Mm-hmm. It's funny they don't have a historian on the team.
Oh, yes.
Anyways, that sounds like more like a timeless thing, which is where my brain's at, talking about the word helicopter, because you don't know how hard it is for me to say helicopter and not call it a helicopter every time I say it.
Right.
My predictive text on my phone comes up with helicopter as soon as I start typing it.
Nice.
Because I used that word so much during the Save Timeless campaign. So, yeah, Magic thinks it might be a helicopter. And, you know, to someone in 1949, a helicopter might look like a spacecraft. So maybe that's what the girls saw. And Jen tells us that the Bell 47 was first sold in 1946. And that is the first helicopter that was available, like, for private sale. Mm-hmm. So I think that makes sense. He definitely could afford one. And if he is running drugs, he would be using a helicopter. It all, you know, the story tracks.
Gotcha.
Jen tells Ian, sorry, it doesn't look like you're going to meet E.T. today. And Ian gives us one of their great comic relief lines, like always, which was something along the lines of, I hope you'll respect my privacy during this time. Like, they're going to go off and be so sad that, you know, that we're dismissing that there's aliens involved here.
And then they are going to be sad for pretty much the rest of the episode. Though I think he does at one point rebound briefly, getting hope that perhaps this is still going to be about aliens. But
by that point,
they
are not excited about it anymore. They're worried about it. Mm-hmm. Then we just have Magic and Addison have a moment, and Magic suggests sending someone else in, letting Addison take a break, sending someone else in, and she says she doesn't want to abandon him again. Mm-hmm. She's going to stick with it, even though things are awkward between them.
And it's funny because Magic is going to take the exact opposite position at the end of the episode that he does here.
Right.
Ben shows up to the sheriff's house to ask about the helicopter.
Ask if Hunt owns one, specifically.
Sheriff says that it wouldn't be in Starlight, but there's a ranch an hour and a half away, and they suggest going now. Addison is skeptical, thinking that they should wait till morning.
Because it's getting dark out?
Yeah, but time is of the essence here, so...
Right. So we'll get this conversation between Addison and Ben after this scene, and she's like, you're making rash decisions. I don't see what was rash about this. No. Going on a drive after dark?
Right.
I'm not sure I see the problem with that.
No, I don't either.
Okay.
I mean, like, yeah, maybe approaching Hunt's men was not necessary, but I don't know. I don't really have a problem with anything that Ben does in this episode. Sheriff says that losing Carrie would be a violation of the promise he made to her mother to keep her safe. And Addison is in the backseat when Ben says he lost his fiance. Okay, so...
yeah, we're back there again.
All right, so instead of my fiance, he's going to be talking about how he lost his fiance to everybody now.
Right.
And other people are going to be like, wait, what are you talking about? You weren't even, like, dating anybody.
At least... in this instance, it's somebody his host doesn't know.
Exactly.
So it's kind of okay. But yeah, it felt like a low blow while Addison's in the back seat to talk about how you lost your fiance in a conversation about losing people as in they died.
Right. Yeah.
Are you trying to make her feel really horrible right now?
I think maybe he is.
Because the whole thing just felt really petty to me.
Right. He said there's no one to blame. It wasn't anybody's fault. And that for him, that means there's nowhere for his anger to go. And I like that. I like that line. And I like that concept. I don't think it's necessarily appropriate to have that conversation with Addison in the back seat.
Right.
But then again, why is she even here? She doesn't need to be here.
Well, she's really worried about him driving in the dark.
I guess so.
Maybe she could turn a flashlight on for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she could do that. So yeah, he's basically saying he's spoiling for a fight, and the sheriff kind of feels the same way.
Yeah. And then they get the light they need.
Mm-hmm.
They see a big light in the sky, and interference comes in on the radio.
Right. And then Addison suddenly can't hear the radio, and then she blinks out, which is very reminiscent, once again, of Oh Ye Will Faith.
And she even references that situation.
Exactly.
So she's pulled out. She goes back into HQ. She's very angry, and she's like, this better not be Janice again.
Right. And Ian points out that Janice is now working for the NSA in Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so she also didn't care about, finding Ben or anything.
Well, it's been 3 years.
I guess so. But, okay, so...
She didn't even work for the project in the first place.
I know, but she had some kind of relationship with Ben. Speaking of which, did anybody even bother to tell her that Ben isn't actually dead?
I mean...
Does she care?
Maybe that's why she's not here, because nobody's told her. Why would they told her she doesn't work for the team?
I know, but still, she knew Ben. She was part of that situation. I don't know.
So yeah, she's in Hawaii right now, and that's, giving us some reason for why she's not here this season.
Right.
And what I took to Twitter is, who else is in Hawaii? Last we heard.
Who would that be?
Katie Beckett.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that doesn't mean anything, but wouldn't that be an awesome way to connect the stories, is to find out that, Janice checked in with Katie or is friends with one of Katie's kids?
Yeah, that'd be cool.
I mean, it would make sense, too, that their families knew each other, and they, if Sam had maintained a relationship with Katie,
mm-hmm.
that Al's kids would know Katie's kids.
Right.
It's
possible.
Yeah. I feel like it was just a little thing that could be potential out there somewhere in the...
Maybe that's who Magic is dating. Okay, that's kind of messed up. But anyway. So yeah, they find out the interference is not happening on the side of the project. It's happening on the Weep side of things.
Right, on Ben's end. And duh?
Yeah.
Like, you really needed confirmation that that's what's happening? Like, there's
right.
a freaking unidentified spacecraft in the air.
Mm.
You've been dealing with this whole story of how there's interference. How would you not think that's where it's coming from?
Right. So, back in the past, they end up getting out of the car. The sheriff ends up shooting at the helicopter. They take a run for it. Ben ends up tripping, screaming at some unknown assailant.
Yeah, he appears to be attacked.
Yep.
Their story's very much following that of Melanie and Carrie now, other than they didn't actually crash the car. Mm-hmm. They just chose to get out of it, which, again, is kind of weird. Why did you get out of the car when it's still perfectly running?
I don't know.
Yeah, so we meet back up with him, and it's now morning.
Mm-hmm.
He's in his hotel bed. Addison has returned. Neither of them have a clue how he got here or what happened between that time in the middle of the night and now.
Mm-hmm. Addison calls him out on the rash decisions that he's making that he wouldn't have made 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And Ben angrily points out, you mean 3 days ago?
Right.
Because from his perspective, it's only been that long.
Right.
It hasn't been the 3 years. And we get a scene with Hannah and Ben.
So he's going to the car, and he sees Hannah from the window of the diner waving to him.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have something to say about that moment.
Okay.
So I'm pausing, I pause and I'm taking notes. And I look at the screen that I have it paused on, and it feels like a very deliberate camera angle where the camera's inside the diner looking at Ben through the window. And I noticed that the diner window is very reminiscent of the sign at Al's place.
Okay.
So the sign, I don't know what the name of the diner is, but it's in that same, curved font on the glass window. And I don't know, it felt intentional to me.
Okay.
That this sign looks like Al's place. That it kind of drew that same of aesthetic,
Okay.
So it got me wondering, is it possible that Hannah is the same type of being as Al the bartender?
Maybe.
Could Hannah be from that same vein, as our GFTW?
Right. Maybe he's Al the bartender's daughter.
Yeah. Could be anything, right?
Right, yeah.
But is that, is she something more outside of time,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we I mean, we didn't mention this yet, but the article came out yesterday confirming by the showrunner she is not a time traveler.
Right. Which could be a misdirect on their part. They could be like, technically correct, but she's not a time traveler now, but maybe she ends up a time traveler. Or,
or is she like someone who time travelers answer to?
Right. Or perhaps she's just someone that Ben is going to continuously run into for throughout her lifetime, which would make it like a season-long arc for something Doctor Who did in a single episode. Or they made an entire movie out of that. They called it The Time Traveler's Wife, which was based on the book. I mean, it's not quite the same scenario here. Did you know anything about that?
About
The Time Traveler's Wife?
I saw that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I got.
Okay.
As far as Doctor Who, though, I don't know what you mean a single episode.
Well, there was an episode where the Doctor continuously visited one single girl throughout her lifetime.
Oh, you're talking about Amy Pond.
Yes.
Well, before he finally got back to her.
Right.
And then she became a main character. I thought you were referring to his relationship with River.
Okay.
Which was a lot more than one episode.
Right. No, I mean, it could be that it's been a long time since I watched that particular series at that time, but yeah, I just remember him continuously showing up in this woman's life, and like there being
she spent her whole life waiting for him,
which is really sad.
It was just like, oh, it was 5 minutes ago for him,
right? So I'm wondering if we're gonna get something like that over a season, or I don't know.
So after she waves to him, he went into the diner to ask him, when did you come in? Did you see me at all today? And she said she started at 6 and she saw the sheriff carry him inside. So it was after 6 a.m. when they got back.
Right.
Why was it so late?
I don't know.
Because it was just starting to get dark when they left. They only drove an hour away. So then it's an hour back, and we're not back till after 6 a.m. I feel like we're missing some time there.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he was with the aliens for longer than he thought.
We learned that Ben's neck is sore and has what looks like a spider bite on it.
Yes.
Addison doesn't think it's a spider bite. And then he asks Hannah to have the sheriff meet him at the hospital.
And so they end up realizing that the rash that Ben has is the same one on Melanie's neck, which makes Ben speculate that she was in fact drugged.
Right, that this is an injection point. And they were both drugged. And Ben says that he thinks the reason Melanie ended up in a coma is because they gave her too much of the drug.
Right.
Because she's smaller than Ben.
And
or
that
his host or whatever.
So he had his blood drawn by a nurse, and he says that he put a rush on the results, which of course he's referring to the project. Addison is leaving to go check on that.
I mean, the way it would have to be, though, and I was thinking about this, like, the hospital would have drawn the blood, and they would have had to run the tests on it.
And then somehow they would have had to have
gotten access to the results. And then they accessed the results to figure out what it was. But would the results have been detailed enough for them to figure out what it was? Because obviously the hospital doesn't know what it is.
I mean, in 1949, I'm not sure that they would be even able to detect half of what they managed to
Right,
detect.
So what was in the results?
And it's not like Addison can take his blood, like Back to the Future.
Right, exactly. So they're analyzing the results from 1949. I feel like the results would have just been like, oh, we didn't find anything.
Or like unknown chemical, and not been any more specific than that.
Right, but they apparently were very specific, because we get this scene back at HQ where Ian very sarcastically tells Magic, Jen, and Addison that them standing around will make the results happen faster.
Because magic is magic.
Yeah, and that's true. He is. And they're shut down when the computer does in fact put out the information they're waiting for just a moment later.
And it turns out to be Gamma Blue 5. And Magic realizes
Magic tells us that this is something the military used in the 40s and 50s. And so this is confirming the military's involvement.
And that Ian says that if he had just gotten a little bit more, Ben himself would have ended up in a coma.
Right.
All right. So they end up realizing that Hunt is leasing his land to the government. Magic issues a bunch of orders. One of them is for Addison to go and tell Ben what they found. And the other ones I'm not really sure about because it's like, it was too fast for me to really pick up.
So Ian narrows it down that they must be within an 1,100 square mile area. They're trying to pinpoint the location of this secret government facility that they are now assuming exists. All because we know the government is involved because it's their drug. Seems like there's a stretch in there somewhere.
Right. I feel like I should have watched this episode like 5 more times than I had time for because, like I said, there's a lot of dialogue that is so rapid fire that I just can't even process it half the time.
Well, I have more comments on that, but I'm going to save them for the end. So Ben goes to tell the sheriff,
right,
like what he's learned without having any reason why you've learned this. That's always a problem with Quantum Leap is where do these people get this information and why do people believe them?
Right.
Anyways, Addison comes to tell Ben that they found a name, General Austin Murray, who is assigned to Los Alamos in the 1940s. So he must be who's running this operation.
Right.
Again, that feels like a stretch, but okay.
Yep, there's some leaps here, if you'll pardon the pun. The sheriff is basically getting ready to run with his granddaughter. The sheriff has been suspended. And they are coming to get Carrie now.
Yeah, this is where we found out that the judge is not coming on Friday. They're coming tomorrow morning, and we're out of time.
Running according to Ziggy only results in Carrie still getting convicted, and the sheriff is now going to jail himself as well.
Right.
Ben suggests giving him 6 more hours to prove what he knows, and the sheriff and him end up going together after convincing the sheriff to do this because he wants Ben to get out of his way, basically.
Ben basically says, we have to find this secret military installation on Hunt's land to prove Carrie's innocence. And Sheriff Morgan's like, oh, there's this old mine.
Right.
That must be it.
Uh-huh.
Why didn't you tell us that yesterday?
Right.
That, again, seems very convenient that we're just jumping to assumptions that he owns half of the state, but it must be this mine is where it's at.
Right. So the sheriff and him go together, but he wants Hannah to be, not Hannah. He wants his granddaughter, Carrie, to be in a safe place.
And Addison the whole time is saying, you can't go. Are you insane? This is too dangerous.
Right. She's specifically saying he still has the drugs that were pumped into his system, and if he gets more, he's probably going to die. This will probably put him into a coma or worse.
Right. So we're back at
This is the only time that I actually think that she kind of has a point.
Yeah, I mean, he was maybe being a little rash here, but also, you gotta do what you gotta do to complete the mission.
Right.
You don't have a choice to just, call out sick.
Right, yeah. I'm just gonna, sit this one out because I got a cold. But, basically, Ben has adrenaline that he swiped from the hospital.
Right.
And she's giving him shit for that, too. She's like, well, since when did you start swiping things?
Yeah, 3 years ago.
Right,
3 years ago, Addison.
Right.
So, yeah, we're back at the hotel now. In the argument this is still going on. And Carrie shows up with Hannah. And this is where we learn that Ben has asked Hannah to help watch over Carrie while they're gone to make sure she's safe and doesn't get arrested or any of that good stuff. And then we have this conversation back at the project. Ian tells Jen and Magic that too much adrenaline and Ben will die.
Right.
And not enough, and it won't counteract the Gamma Blue 5, and then he'll go into a coma. So either of those things sound really bad. They
do. And basically, the project wants to put a stop to this. They want Addison to convince Ben not to do this. Addison is getting nowhere with that, convincing him to do anything.
Yeah, and then she's like, how about you just go to Hunt and talk to him about it?
Right.
Because
he's proven reasonable so far this episode.
Yeah, he would be great help.
So he ends up going to, I guess, where the mine is. This isn't enough to trigger a helicopter or any of this other crap. So far.
And this is where we also get that moment where Ian suggests this could still be a military base that's investigating a UFO.
Right.
And that scares them more than excites them at this point.
So he injects the adrenaline, hops the fence. Addison says she already buried him once. She doesn't want to do it again. And Ben angrily says, hey, no one made you do that.
Yeah, he finally lashes out at her.
Right, and
no one made you bury me after
right.
2 years. It's not my fault.
Right.
That you lost me. Sorry.
Right.
But I'm the one who has to live now with the fact that you buried me.
Right.
And he says, this plan will only work if you stay by my side as a hologram. Don't give up on me again.
Yes. And you know what? I love that. I love that little moment. I'm glad that we got that. It makes sense for Ben to be angry in that way for that reason. And it's something that we brought up. Like him, like the fact that they just kind of gave up on him.
Right.
So the anger he has here is absolutely deserved.
Mm-hmm.
So Addison ends up reacting to this by appearing.
Yeah, she follows him in.
Yeah.
And then he's attacked by the glowing eye men.
So Ben is taken to the facility. We see all sorts of imagery.
Yeah, and this is where we get that shot from the previews and everything of Ben on that table.
Right.
That made us think we're actually dealing with aliens here.
Right. It looks like he's on an autopsy table, which I guess is not the case exactly. The next morning, the military drops him into a field, and the sheriff ends up arriving. Addison says that she saw everything, but doesn't exactly tell us what she saw.
Right, but this was the plan, we now realize, was even though he's drugged, Addison will be able to stay with him and see and hear everything that's happening. And then he just has to claim that he saw it, and we've got proof. Right.
The trio wait for General Murray to arrive, which he finally does.
Yeah, and how exactly did they set that up?
I'm not entirely clear on that. Ben tells him that everything that he knows, and that they got pics of Ben being nabbed.
Right, that Sheriff Morgan took pictures.
Right, and the military dumping him made for even better pictures. Ben says, oh yeah, and the general's just like, well, it sounds like trespassing to me.
Right, because they're so confident that Ben's not going to remember anything because of the drugs.
Ben says he saw everything, which I think he doesn't remember specifically.
Right,
but
this is Addison told him, here's what you need to say. And this included the prototype 3-barrel night vision goggles. That was our glowing eyes.
Right.
The 0-point jet that they're testing, which looks an awful lot like a UFO.
It does.
Or, it looks like a flying saucer.
Right.
I should say.
Well, the government is clearly experimenting with, extraterrestrial technology here.
I mean, is that what they were pointing at? Were they trying to say this was reverse engineered?
I mean, it's possible.
Or, what were they trying to say? They didn't really tell us what they were trying to say about this.
No, they don't actually take a position whether this was aliens or not.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, they're saying that what they were experiencing wasn't aliens, it was the military.
Right.
But
is the military
experimenting
on alien technology?
Fox Mulder would say yes.
I mean, we have confirmation that aliens exist in this universe.
Right.
Sam saw them.
Oh, see, I thought you were talking about our actual government in the real world.
I meant this universe.
Right.
Quantum Leap universe.
Yes.
The shared universe where Sam and Ben come from.
Yeah.
And he said he also, even heard the doctors talking about their golf game while they injected him with Gamma Blue 5.
Mm-hmm.
How would he know the name of it, though, just by seeing it? He seems to know even more than he would know if he did have recollection of this. Yeah, just
laying on the table, he managed to pick up a lot of details.
Yeah. And then Addison adds, she saw plenty more that Congress probably doesn't know about as well.
Which is interesting that that's a threat that she makes because they can't hear her.
They can't hear her. Yeah, I kind of want to know, what else did you see?
Right.
Like, can we expand on this a little bit?
Right.
So they say, what do you want to keep your mouth shut? And what they want is an antidote for Melody.
Mm-hmm.
Melanie. See, I said Melody before, and now it's in
Melody. It's a good name. Unfortunately, not the name of the character of this episode, but it's a good name. She also wants, the sheriff wants Carrie to get a scholarship, and a statement provided about a too low-flying helicopter causing the crash.
Right, basically, tell Hunt that this was your fault, so that Carrie doesn't take the blame. And then the sheriff says he also wants a new car.
Right. And then Ben suggests that they want the base to get moved.
Yeah, they said you need to get out of Starlight.
Yes.
Even though aren't we like a whole hour away from it now?
I guess.
But get out of Starlight, leave our people alone, and Ben suggests Groom Lake.
Area 51.
Area 51. And that's where we had seen him say that in the previews. And I was like, why are we talking about Area 51 if we're in New Mexico? That's where it came from.
Yes.
And I'm a little confused by that, too. Like, are they suggesting that Ben just caused Area 51 to be built?
I mean, maybe.
Because it already existed for him to know about it, that it existed.
Right.
So...
Yeah, I'm not really sure, but you know what my response to all these, demands? Why not just simply kill these guys and be done with it?
Yeah.
They don't have to do any of that.
Although, he's a government agent, so...
I mean, that hasn't,
they know where he is, though. This was just going to send more people to come investigate.
Okay, so they can't just have them disappear.
Because remember, the whole concept here is that they're the government, but they're doing things that the rest of the government doesn't even know about. They're hiding things.
Gotcha.
Kind of like Quantum Leap.
Oh, yes.
Who, was hiding from the government, the fact that Ben even left in the first place.
Right, okay. So
we still haven't resolved how that came about.
And we're probably never going to, because they're probably never going to get back into that. But, yeah. So the sheriff ends up saying goodbye to Ben.
Yeah, and Ben tells him to talk to his granddaughter about how he feels. It's the hardest thing in the world, but it's the only way forward. And he's definitely talking about his own feelings here.
Yes.
Realizing, he needs to talk to Addison.
Mm-hmm. I don't think we're going to see that conversation in this episode, though, unless we've already had it, and that was it.
No, I definitely think there's more conversation to be had.
Oh, goody. I can't wait. All right.
And this is when Addison goes to talk to Magic, and we realize she's having a hard time with this, too.
Heart to heart with Magic.
Heart to heart. We got to have our heart to hearts at headquarters. It wouldn't be headquarters if we didn't have heart to hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And he comments on, how their grief doesn't go away just because he's alive now. They still feel all the things they felt during those 3 years.
Right.
They still dealt with his death, even though he didn't die.
That was still a traumatic situation for them.
Right. And, he suggests, that she needs to go lean on Tom because none of them should go through this alone.
Tom, who we don't see in this episode.
We don't see him in this episode. He's in Washington, apparently.
I mean, I don't need to see him. I'm fine with it.
So when she leaves, Magic takes out his phone and makes a phone call.
Ah, yes.
We don't know who he's calling. He says, "Hey, it's me. Got a minute? This is all a lot harder than I thought."
Mm-hmm.
And who do we think he's talking to?
And, of course, this is where that poll comes into play. Yeah. So,
I'll give you my opinion first.
Okay.
My money's on he's talking to whoever he was buying jewelry for.
Yes. I think that would be pretty much my opinion.
Yeah. I feel like he's talking to his partner, whoever that is. And as I said last week, I'm leaning towards thinking that partner is Beth.
And I'm also leaning there with you.
And, I feel that even more so after, seeing this and thinking about it because, when Ben disappeared, Beth would have been a person that Magic would have been able to talk to about it. There's not a lot of people they can talk to at all, right? Beth already has clearance. She knows about the project. That's somebody he could legally confide in.
Right.
If it was some brand new girlfriend, he's not going to tell her about the project.
Right.
Like, that would be a big no-no.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he still might have, but, it's much more, it makes much more sense that it's Beth, right? That we're talking to about that. And during this time, it could have drawn them a lot closer because Beth's done this. She's been that support system for Al.
Exactly.
And Magic's our new Al, right?
Mm-hmm.
The friend that lost the Leaper and is now dealing with that. And that just lines up that after Ben disappeared, Magic and Beth would have gotten closer as he was looking for someone to just deal with that grief with.
Mm-hmm.
And that would make sense that that's who he's talking to now about how hard this is. Even though he's back, that just makes it even more complicated.
Right. And it can't be a random... I mean, the person he's buying jewelry from can't be a random nobody at this point.
It could be, but it doesn't make sense that they're keeping it so secretive.
Right. They're setting it up in a way that they want us to ask, this question in the first place.
Right.
And if it's just a random nobody, then that's kind of just disappointing and pointless. So it has to be someone that we know.
Yeah, now I saw other suggestions.
Yes.
Throughout the Facebook groups about who the call is with, not about the girlfriend.
Right.
Some people I saw agreeing with me that it sounds like it's probably Beth.
Right.
I saw people suggest Tom Beckett, which I think that would be interesting. Interesting way. Like we had suggested before the series even started, that Magic and Tom, may have maintained a friendship after serving together.
It would make sense that they still know each other.
Yeah, and it would make sense if they are buddies, especially because we know Magic ended up becoming friends with the Calavicis.
Right.
It makes sense that he's still in his peripheral somewhere, you know?
Yeah.
So could this be a way to bring Tom into the story? Sure. I'd be okay with that if he's talking to Tom. I saw people suggesting both Donna and Sammy Joe.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I don't think so. That would be a weird way to bring either of them into this story.
Right. And
we already know that, Deborah Pratt's trying to save Sammy Joe for a future project. So this doesn't seem like the place we're going to do that.
Wait, so Deborah Pratt wants to bring Sammy Joe into this?
Well, she was hoping to have, a Quantum Leap movie to include Sammy Joe. Right,
of course.
So would it be like that's who Magic's talking to? Probably not.
Right. No, I don't think so.
And I saw people suggest that it's Hannah. I mean, we don't know who Hannah is. I guess that's possible.
It's possible. I don't see that fitting
I don't
into the
think
story.
so. If it's okay, so if Hannah is living a linear life,
right,
like she presents that she is, she'd be in her 90s right now,
right,
like 20 years older than Magic.
Yeah,
doesn't seem to be the case.
Right. I mean, you never know.
You never know, but yeah. So I said, so many people are talking about this. Let me ask, and I made a poll on Twitter, and it was only active for a couple of hours because I didn't think about to do that until this afternoon. So I only got 11 votes, not a very big sample, but I put those choices up. I put Beth, Tom Beckett, Hannah, and then I put Donna and Sammy Joe in the same category because you could only put 4 choices up on Twitter or X or
because I was going to add
we're calling it.
I was going to add a 5th one to that, like after I saw the poll, like after it closed, and be like, well, maybe one of the answers should be it's nobody that we know. Yeah.
Well, I mean, on Facebook you can add as many as you want, but I didn't put this in my Facebook group just because, you know, my own Facebook group rules say no talking about the current episode, so I didn't want to put a spoilery poll up in my group.
That makes sense.
Maybe I'll do that after my spoiler.
Dang your own rules.
The spoiler warning goes off Saturday, so maybe we'll ask this question to that group because I know we'll get more of a response there and bring it back next week. But the 11 people who answered on Twitter, 45%, so 5 votes was for Beth. Yeah. And then the other 3 answers all received 2 votes or 18%. Right. Straight across the board even.
Yes, that was interesting.
So there are people who think all of these things. And which, you know, I didn't make all these ideas up. These are all things I saw people saying. Right. That I pulled these from. So, yeah, there's thoughts out there.
Well.
Thoughts out there about who Magic is talking to.
If you guys are here, and I'm sure that you are, some of you. I mean, anybody who's listening at this point is here. Yeah, so.
Yes, you are here.
Yes. Once again, as you can probably tell, I'm pretty brain dead at this point. Because, you know, once again, I worked another 8-hour day and then came here and did this podcast late at night.
Starting with watching the episode and taking all of your notes before that 8-hour workday. Right,
exactly. So, if you guys have an opinion about who this could be, leave it in the comments. Let us know what your thoughts are on the matter. So yeah, anything else on that?
No, let's move on. The next scene, Ben goes to say goodbye to Hannah before he leaves.
Yes, he starts quoting the general theory of relativity, and she ends up finishing it. Right. And he asks, what kind of waitress knows that? Well, I mean, could she be a waitress going to college or be just, I don't know.
I mean, in 1949.
I don't know. It's just a kind of a weird comment that, you know, like a waitress couldn't possibly
He
know.
was impressed.
Yes.
That she knew this. But yeah, I see where it may have came off as kind of a rude comment. But she didn't take it that way.
Right. She said she used to work as a programmer during the war. But once the war ended and all the men came back, she got booted out from that.
Yeah, she worked on the first electromechanical computer. Ooh. Which sounds pretty impressive.
It does. Ben gives her a name of a person who's going to start a program that is going to include women.
Yeah. His name is Professor Yates at Princeton, and he's about to open up a physics program for female candidates. He tells her to reach out to him and go live the life you want to live, which is a very powerful line.
It is indeed. Ben says goodbye. Hannah says, don't say goodbye. It's so final. Say, see you later. Ben obliges, and then he ends up weeping.
So, he says, see you later, turns around. Looks very sad because he would like to see her later, and he knows he won't, except we know otherwise.
Right.
Since she's a main cast member.
Right. We actually see where Ben goes.
Yeah, we got our first leap out of the season.
He sees a dude played by Tim Matheson. Now, you would know him from having played Rebecca's father on This Is Us. I know him from both that and, of course, his appearances on The West Wing as Vice President John Hoynes.
Yeah, I took a little peek at his IMDb because people seemed really excited about him appearing in the episode, and I was like, I recognize this guy's face, but I wasn't sure what the big deal was. He has a really extensive IMDb.
He is a pretty impressive character
including
actor.
Being a main character in Virgin River.
Oh, okay. I didn't catch
circling back to our Robin Carr universe that we're also talking about in our Sullivan's Crossing podcast.
Yeah. Oh, it all comes round and round.
It really does.
Yeah.
Like, have you even been feeling that since we're covering so many different shows?
Absolutely.
We just keep circling. I saw he was also in a couple of Stephen King things.
Yes, he definitely was.
Fitting, with our talks about the Stephen King universe.
Yes, there we go. He's giving him a random rundown on what sounds like it's going to be a terrorist attack. And that's where that episode ends. I do have an episode description and a title.
Okay.
Next week's episode is titled Lonely Hearts Club, and it's Ben leaps into the body of an ambitious Hollywood assistant whose famous client, Neil Russell, is in danger. As Ben realizes that Neil's circumstances may shed light on his own, his working relationship with Addison reaches an inflection point. Now, that seems to indicate that this is not going to be some kind of terrorist attack where they end up going to kill everybody.
Sounds like they're
in some kind of Hollywood movie or something.
Yeah, which makes sense.
Yeah, that should be interesting. The preview wasn't very helpful.
So the preview was really short again.
Yeah.
And most of the scenes we saw in the preview was either things that already happened.
Right.
Or things that are going to happen in the rest of these 8 episodes.
Right.
And that was really weird to me.
Yes.
I feel like they didn't give us anything about this episode. We got like I think is the mirror, was that supposed to be the sleep?
I have no idea.
I was about to say Sam, where Ben's standing in front of a mirror and he's a woman. I feel like that was the sleep.
I don't know.
But yeah, I'm like, what are we even looking at? This is so okay, usually when you watch a show, the first episode of the season, after it, we get this season on, right? We don't usually get a dedicated trailer for the second episode of a season of television. It's usually like, here's everything happening this season. I feel like every week so far, our trailers have been this season on.
Right.
Or like even this whole series, here we go.
Right.
I feel like none of these trailers have been specific to episodes at all.
I thought last week's was kind of specific to this episode. At least
it was a little more so.
Right.
But still, it showed like a lot of stuff from other episodes.
And the one clip we did get is Ben saying to Addison, I'm not over you yet.
Yeah.
And okay, look, if we're gonna do this every week, I'm gonna start getting annoyed with them. I don't need this to be brought up in every single episode.
But he doesn't have closure.
Of course not.
All that happened this episode was, he ended up yelling at her. And then he did have that discussion with the sheriff where he's like, yeah, you need to talk. So he does need to talk to her. We haven't had the talk yet.
Right.
We've pretty much just had avoidance to the issue. So they do need to talk it out.
Right.
But yeah, then we need to move past it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then move on to other things. We can't do this every episode every week.
I agree.
So do we have anything else to say?
Yeah, so let's talk just a little bit more about Hannah.
Okay, let's do it.
So we know she's not a time traveler.
Well, at least
we've been told
saying.
She's not a time traveler. So what's happening? I had my whole, she's similar to Al the bartender thought.
A thought I did have today earlier. I thought that perhaps she could actually somehow be Ben's daughter.
Okay.
Maybe
She doesn't look particularly Asian, but
no, but yes, but I mean, he could have gotten with somebody that wasn't Asian, and maybe those genes were more dominant.
Right. Well, I know one thing I had suggested to you off air was maybe she was Addison's daughter.
Okay.
In that case, I this was just me spewing thoughts. Maybe it's Addison and Tom's daughter, and Ben, and she's this all involves her being a time traveler, of course, which we're told she isn't.
Well, so in the case of it being Ben's daughter.
Oh, you mean like the way Sammy Joe was Sam's daughter?
Yeah, yes.
Gotcha.
Like, I mean, like
it's a child he hasn't fathered in the past.
Yes.
Yet.
Right.
Okay.
But eventually he's going to leap to a point where he ends up having intimate relations with somebody.
With Hannah's mother.
Right. And
okay, I see it. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, but my thought would have, if it was Addison and Tom's daughter, that would mean she's a time traveler from the future.
Right.
And, my thought line there was, oh, well, Ben becomes close to her, finds out who she is, and then this becomes a reason that he can't split up Addison and Tom because he's already, in love with his character and doesn't want her to disappear from time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But if she's not a time traveler, that's nothing. That's out the window. So does he just run into her repeatedly, during her natural life? Do we take this at face value that she's this, 20-something-year-old girl in 1949?
That seems too simple.
I know, right? For them to be she's more than she seems to be. And to be a regular cast member. Right. And Ben sleeping all over time. We've confirmed that we're going to see her again in was it episode, I didn't write it down. I think it's episode 6 we see her again.
Okay.
For sure. That we've seen in the previews.
Gotcha.
When he's it's the Nazi spy episode.
Okay, which would be around the same time frame, I guess, is where he is in this episode.
Right. Or even earlier.
Yeah.
So does he meet her before he met her?
Huh.
I mean, that's possible. But, and she did say she, worked on whatever during the war.
Yeah. Huh.
But if we're meeting her during her natural life, I feel like that really limits how many times we can see her.
Right.
And she's a regular full-time cast member, so shouldn't we be seeing her a lot?
We should be.
That's why I'm just really confused by this whole situation.
I mean, if she's just appearing in a couple episodes, how is that a regular and not just a guest star in a couple episodes?
Or just, a
reoccurring character, not part of the main cast.
Yeah, and she was credited, right up there in the front credits. She's part of the cast. And that could just be, I guess, contract negotiations, that's where she wanted to be in order to be part of the show.
I guess so. So I'm very curious to see how this story unfolds, for sure.
Well, is this all have something to do with ripples in time that Ben has caused by telling her to go see Professor Yates? Right? Is our timeline changing around us because she's changing who she is because of him? Which, could be the case of any person involved in a leap if we follow their life, right?
Well,
and we see the ripples.
Going to see Professor Yates makes her into a time traveler, whereas she's not a time traveler here.
Right.
And that's a misdirect. She's not here a time traveler,
right.
But she will be.
Right. And I do think that's a possible direction that this could go. But also, if her going to see Yates changes not just her life, but something that involves the project. We would know that right away, wouldn't we? If the timeline changed in a gigantic way.
Yes.
So I don't feel like that's something they could string us along with. If it's making a big impact, it's going to make a big impact immediately.
Yeah.
And I still think she might be an alien.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping they don't go that direction.
And I said this last week. I feel like, they're introducing her in the alien episode. I hope she's not an alien. After the not an alien episode.
Yes.
I still think she could be an alien.
Maybe.
Because
they didn't deny that she was an alien.
Seeing her be a waitress, it reminded me a lot of Roswell.
Okay.
The TV show.
Yeah.
Which, of course, is about, the fact that the Roswell incident really did introduce aliens to New Mexico, and they're just living their life here now.
Right.
So yeah, I was like, I still kind of think it's possible that she's an alien.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe he'll meet her all throughout history and she doesn't age any.
That would be...
But she's not a time traveler.
Right.
She just doesn't age because she's an alien.
Right.
She's like a Doctor Who.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's possible. I don't love that. I don't want it to be that, but I feel like that's still a possibility. Speaking of Roswell, there was no mention of Roswell in this episode.
That's interesting.
I found it weird that we wouldn't have mentioned Roswell because we're in New Mexico.
Right.
In 1959, or 1949 rather.
Mm-hmm.
That incident happened in New Mexico in 1947.
Right.
It should have been relevant to the conversations we were having in this episode.
Right.
And it never came up once, which I thought was odd. We did get a reference to Roswell in episode 201.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't get one here when we're actually in New Mexico talking about UFOs.
Why do you suppose
2 years after that incident. So it was fresh.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, Ian should have brought it up.
Yes.
I don't know. I felt like it was missing. Like I said, there's things that I just felt were missing. I feel like that's one of them. Like, why are we not mentioning Roswell?
Right.
I get that that's not what we're talking about, but you just think it would have came up.
Mm-hmm.
You know what else I was disappointed didn't come up during these discussions?
What?
Project Quantum Leap. We spent a whole chunk of time talking about government projects and facilities in New Mexico. Now, it didn't exist in 1949.
It certainly does, in
but
the
should
future.
it not have come up at the project when they're
Right.
talking about the map and there's no facilities within 500 miles?
Right.
We didn't say there's no facilities within 500 miles in 1949 because Project Quantum Leap wasn't there yet.
Mm-hmm.
Because Project Quantum Leap was in New Mexico, a secret government facility. Was that on Hunt's land?
Oh.
Because he owns half the state.
Yeah.
Is it some of his land that becomes... and I kind of thought that's where we were going at one point, that this facility will eventually be the place where Project Quantum Leap is built.
That would be interesting.
But instead of mentioning Sam's project at all, we were just like, oh, get this project out of here. And I felt saddened that we didn't get some reference to our original headquarters.
Yep, understandable.
I just felt like there was opportunities to bring it up.
Yes.
And we didn't.
Yeah, I hear you.
Because we're in New Mexico. We don't bring up Project Quantum Leap or Roswell. Why are we in New Mexico then? Right?
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
We could be anywhere.
Yeah.
Pretty much. We don't have to be in Mexico at all.
Yeah.
Huh?
And that's it. That's all I got.
Okay. We would like to hear from you. What do you think of the podcast? What do you think of this episode? Stacie can be reached at?
I can be reached on Twitter, X, Instagram, and Threads at TVN Coupon Talk.
If you like this video and want to support the channel, there are a number of ways to do so. You can follow me on Twitter at Core Productions. You can follow one of my Core Productions Facebook pages. You can buy something on the Core Productions store on Zazzle. You can buy me a coffee, which is a new way to support content creators such as ourselves. And of course, you can like, share, and comment on this video, as well as subscribing to our channel. This is Dave and Stacie from Core Productions, signing off.